Hello and welcome everyone. You will notice that you are on mute. Please type your questions in the question box on the control panel on the right side of your screen. Orlando will answer them at the end. I would now like to introduce all of you to Orlando Wood, Innovation Director at BrainJuicer. Orlando, I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Pam. Hello and a warm welcome to everyone to this BrainJuicer webinar on emotions in advertising. We're recording this session just to let you know that now, and we'll make it available shortly afterwards on request. So we're going to be talking today about emotions in advertising, and there has been some debate in recent years about emotion and the role of emotion in advertising. I'm looking forward to sharing with you today some new learnings on emotion. But just to think back to the role of emotion in advertising, it's not something that really has featured in many models of advertising for, well, certainly until recently. We've long believed as an industry that advertising success depended on the delivery of a persuasive and well-branded message that had impact or cut through. That the prevalent model of advertising really is all about gaining attention, provoking interest, evoking desire, and ensuring that there is action. And this was a model that was very convenient for the research industry, because it was nicely structured, it made sense, and it could be explained easily. But it's an approach that actually has its origins in face-to-face selling, theories that abounded at the beginning of the 20th century that were adapted for print advertising and well before the advent of TV advertising, before the advent of TV, in fact. Slowly, though, I think the industry is beginning to realize that the human brain doesn't process things in this linear, regimented, sort of logical, sequential way, and that emotion plays a significant role, a central role, in fact, in effectiveness. And it's every bit as important as message delivery, indeed more so. So what I'd like to do today is to talk to you about emotion, how we go about measuring it, before sharing some exciting new findings on the importance of emotion for effectiveness and efficiency in advertising. So without further ado, let's begin. Happiness. Happiness is just one of the core emotions that a psychologist called Paul Ekman has established as being universally recognized across the world, recognized in facial features, recognized and understood by people from all over the world, whether it be Papua New Guinea, Northern America, through to 20 other sort of Western, Eastern cultures. Paul Ekman has established that there are 7 emotions we all recognize and express in exactly the same way through our faces. And he concludes that these 7 emotions are the 7 core emotions for existence. They're hardwired in us and have really sort of developed in us over the years to be helpful in our everyday lives. And those 7 emotions are shown here: happiness, fear, disgust, anger, surprise, contempt, and sadness. And each one of those emotions has its own purpose. Happiness is a very motivating, mobilizing emotion. It spurs us forward. Fear protects us. Fear protects us, that's right. Disgust protects us from ourselves. Anger warns other people. Surprise is a warning mechanism for ourselves. Contempt seeks to modify other people's behavior, and sadness seeks help from other people. And these 6 emotions, and in fact all emotions really, are quite important in our everyday lives, because if you think about it, we seek to maximize pleasurable emotions and minimize negative emotions where at all possible. And emotions actually drive our motivations and decisions more so than we perhaps care to recognize. And in fact, they're essential for many of the everyday decisions that we make. It becomes very difficult to make decisions when the part of our brain that's responsible for emotion is deactivated. And there have been various studies that have shown this. So whether it's the big decisions in our lives through to making decisions about which magazine or washing powder we're going to buy, emotions are very important for helping us frame and shape and make decisions. There's a very interesting piece of work that I recommend to anyone who I speak to, really, by Les Binet and Peter Field, who've analysed the database that the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising have at their disposal in the UK, and shows from a great number of case studies how emotional advertising campaigns are more effective and more profitable than rational campaigns, even when those campaigns are in rational categories. And a nice example slide from that analysis is shown here. And it shows that emotional campaigns, a greater proportion of them, report very large profit gains than rational campaigns. So emotional campaigns do seem to outperform from the evidence that there is already in the industry. But market research is still dominated by the rational measures, evaluative measures. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about how that might change. There are a number of different ways of measuring emotion. There are two basic approaches. The first approach is called sort of self-report. An example of that is up in the top left-hand corner of this slide. Here, this is simply asking people, how do you feel? Which of these emotions do you feel? Now, there's a problem with self-report in that when you ask people how they feel, they have to process and think through what they're feeling. And that can distort or suppress what it is that they're actually feeling. And it's not a very accurate way of establishing what it is that people are really feeling. As well as self-report, there's something else called psychophysiological measurement, which is shown here in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And that's essentially a sort of group of mechanisms for measuring the changes in your body as a result of an emotional episode. So whether it's MRI scanning, skin conductance, heart rate, eye tracking movement, all of these things are measures of changes in the body. Now, these are not particularly practical on a large scale in terms of quantitative research, but they're not very cheap either. But the real problem with them is, at least for now, they're a measure of if rather than how or why we're feeling. And whilst they're very helpful, they've been helpful for showing the mechanisms at play within the brain. Neuroscience is really still only a fledgling scientific endeavor, but one that's extremely interesting and very helpful for understanding how the brain works. It's not particularly helpful for telling us really why or how we're feeling at the moment. And then there are two sort of techniques, if you like, for measuring emotion through self-report, so asking people how they feel. The first of these is top right here. This is Lang's self-assessment mannequin that's been around for 30 years now, and it's a dimensional approach. So here we ask people to express how they're feeling across 3 dimensions: pleasure, arousal, and dominance. And different combinations of these are said to give you to pinpoint the exact emotion that you're feeling. But this is quite a difficult thing for respondents to do, and it's also quite ambiguous. It's open to interpretation. Different combinations can perhaps mean different things. And in the bottom left here, you can see an example of what's known as the basic emotion approach, where you have a set of core emotions and you ask people which one it is you're feeling. This is Primo for Peter Desmet and colleagues who created this in 2000 using cartoon characters of 18 different emotions. And the problem with the basic emotion approach is that you need to know which emotions it is that are key and central for measurement. What we realized a few years ago, whilst we were when we set about developing our emotional measure, was that Ekman's work is extremely important for 2 reasons. First of all, it tells us which emotions we should be looking to capture, the 7 basic emotions that I showed you a few moments ago, but it also gives us a means of accessing how people feel, accessing their emotions via self-report with minimal cognitive processing on the part of the respondent. So it means that we can show people a set of faces and ask them which one it is that reflects the way they're feeling. Because faces have a direct route to our brains, in fact. And when you show people a set of faces, it's a very intuitive way of asking people how they're feeling. And in fact, if I asked you all now, perhaps you practice this in your own time, but to pull one of those faces that I was showing you earlier, you'll feel before long that emotion start to creep across you. And it's been shown by Ekman that there's a direct link between our faces, our facial muscles, and our brains. So this is the way that we go about measuring emotion. We show people an advert, we conduct research online, we show them an advert, and then immediately afterwards we ask them which of these faces best expresses how you feel about this advert. We show them the 7 faces that I showed you before, but we also show neutral, because it's very important to know if people feel nothing in response to the ad. So we show them these faces, and if respondents select any of those outer faces, they are then asked the intensity with which they feel that emotion. So in this case, it's disgust. Because we want to know not only the type of emotion that's felt at the end of an ad, but the degree to which it's felt, the sort of depth of the impression that's left on people. And then we ask, what was it that made you feel this way? What was it about the ad that made you feel this way? And that's very important because it helps us to pinpoint what it is about the ad that's working well or perhaps working less well. And this approach, FaceTrace, is the measure that we use, and that's what we call it, won Best Method in 2007 at the SMR conference. So what I'd like to do now is share with you a few experiments and how we have shown that this emotional measure really to be very predictive of success and effectiveness in the marketplace. The first of these was an experiment that we conducted a few years ago now, and we conducted a number of sort of paired tests, if you like, a number of monadic tests. We tested 8 ads monadically, and we had, amongst those 8 ads, we had different pairs of ads. So we tested 2 ads from communications category, 2 ads from a fruit juice category, 2 ads from a car category, and also 2 ads from a cat food category. And what you can see here is the results of that experiment. I should say that in each pair of ads, we deliberately tested one ad that had won an IPA Effectiveness Award. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising is a very well-established body in the UK that gives awards based on effectiveness of advertising, and that agencies and advertisers can write papers, submit these papers to the IPA to prove the effectiveness of the advertising that they have created. It's a very rigorous awards ceremony, really, awards, and it's what it does is that you have to demonstrate in your paper how well you essentially through econometric modeling or sales data how effective your advertising has been. So it's very rigorous. And what you can see here is that the IPA award-winning ads achieved higher levels of emotional intensity. That's the score across the top, and it's measured on a scale of 0 to 3. It takes into account the proportion of people feeling nothing as well, so that's included in that weighted measure. And it also shows you that on the whole, almost without exception actually, we see higher levels of happiness for the award-winning ads and less neutrality for the award-winning ads. So this was all very interesting, and a number of our clients were interested, and we thought it was a helpful validation, really, of the fact that emotion is predictive of success. But we wanted to do more, and we wanted to prove it really beyond what we hoped would be reasonable doubt. So we conducted last year another experiment. And what we did this time is that we went to the IPA and we asked them whether we could use their effectiveness database. With every submission that is made to the IPA for an award, the contributors have to complete a questionnaire which includes details of the advert, of the campaign, details in terms of reported effectiveness, and people submitting the award have to complete this form to really give some data to the IPA to show, demonstrate really their effectiveness. So the IPA has this effectiveness data that we were able to use. So we tested a number of TV ads, 18 in total, from recent years, with data from 2006 onwards, and the ads were from food, drink, household, personal care, and durables categories. We tested ads from campaigns which had a TV weight of at least 50%, because it was the TV ad that we were testing and that we were interested in principally. And what happened was the IPA conducted the analysis for us to ensure complete impartiality and also confidentiality of the results. We weren't allowed to know the results of the individual, the effectiveness results of the individual ads. And what we wanted to do was to assess the ability of a number of standard measures to predict advertising effectiveness, and also to see how predictive of effectiveness our emotional measure was. And the way that we were going to do that was look at what is called the numbers of very large business effects. So the very large business effects are reported as part of this questionnaire that people submit to the IPA as part of their awards application. And what a business effect is one of market share gain, reduction in price sensitivity, increased penetration, profit gain, or loyalty gain. And so what we would do is we would order the ads that we tested on any measure of interest, so persuasion for instance, and we'd take the top 9 ads on persuasion and see how many business effects, very large business effects, on average were generated by those top 9 ads. So it was an analysis in aggregate rather than at an individual level. The reason we use very large business effects rather than any other measure is that we don't always have records of ROI, we don't always have records of share gain, but where there is both share gain and ROI data, the IPA have shown that these very large business effects are an extremely indicative measure of both large ROI and very high levels of share gain. So it's a really useful proxy measure for effectiveness in the absence of other data. And we have it for every ad that we have tested as part of this exercise. So going into this experiment, we had a hypothesis really that an emotional measure might be more sensitive, might have a higher sort of range of sensitivity than traditional evaluative measures such as persuasion or relevance or these sorts of measures. And what we wanted to do really by taking ads from essentially good ads, because these are all ads that have been submitted for awards, we wanted to see at the very highest level really of effectiveness, and I should say that not all of these ads did win awards, only 7 of them, that an emotional measure might be better actually at picking out those potentially highly effective ads than these traditional measures, which might in some cases stifle effectiveness. We also believe, of course, that traditional measures might let through extremely weak ads in the way that an emotional measure might actually be more discriminating against those weak ads too. So our belief was that that emotional measures would be more sensitive to more sensitive measures essentially. So I'd like to share some data from our experiment now, and this slide shows you the ability of 3 key measures to predict business effects. So what we've got here is the best 9 ads on emotional intensity compared with the best 9 ads when ordered on persuasion, compared with the best 9 ads when ordered on brand linkage. And what you're seeing here is the average number of business effects, be they small, medium, or very large effects, for the best 9 ads on each of those 3 measures. And you can see that emotional intensity, the best 9 ads on emotional intensity, the most intensely emotional ads, if you like, achieve more very large business effects, the key measure that we're interested in, than either persuasion or brand linkage. And when you look across to persuasion and brand linkage, you can see in the pattern of results that in fact the results seem to support our hypothesis that persuasion and brand linkage, these evaluative measures, are actually better at predicting mediocre or medium effects, if you like, than they are at predicting very large effects. So perhaps it is the case, it seems, that these types of measures are stifling creativity, stifling really effective advertising. Just want to share with you a couple of case studies that really seek to demonstrate that point. First of these is for an advert that's very well known, certainly in Europe, and I guess it probably is as well further afield. It made quite an impact, and that's the Cadbury Dairy Milk Gorilla ad. We tested this ad for our interest, and you can see the results here, the proportion of people feeling each emotion and its overall intensity score, very high levels of happiness, extremely high levels of emotional intensity compared with our norm. You can see that on the left-hand side. If you look at the more traditional measures on the right-hand side, you can see how, when compared with our norm, the Gorilla ad performs very badly. So you might have progressed the ad on emotional measures, our emotional measure, but you would have been inclined to dismiss it on more traditional measures. Yet this ad was probably Cadbury's most effective ad ever and drove 9% revenue growth, but it wouldn't have been progressed on these traditional measures. Second case study I'd like to share with you is for one brand, 2 subsequent campaigns, 2 TV ads from 2 subsequent campaigns, and we tested these, and you've got them here relative to the commercial ads norm that we have. And you can see that the first campaign, the first ad from the first campaign, was slightly more emotionally engaging than the second TV ad from the second campaign for the same brand. This mirrors quite nicely the ROI that was achieved by those 2 ads. If you look over on the right-hand side, you can see that more information-based measures actually would have pointed you in the other direction. If you'd been relying on those, you would have gone for the other ad, the less effective ad. So, armed with this first run of the data, we thought, well, let's try out a completely new measure. We know that some emotions are more conducive to action and behavior than others, that happiness is an extremely motivating emotion. So we gave a weight to each emotion based on observed historical data that we've been collecting, and we have created what we call an emotion interaction score, and it's a score that we believe is likely to predict behavior, and that's to say positive behavior towards your brand in the marketplace. This is what it looks like. It's on a scale of 0 to 100. We've only shown it sort of 50 to 85 here, which is the typical sort of range of responses that we tend to get for finished films. And you can see here in this slide the average score of advertising that has won an IPA Effectiveness Award. So these are the winners from all the ads we've ever tested, winners of IPA awards. And their score is higher than the UK finished film norm. So ads that perform well on emotion into action and that have demonstrated business effects, they get a higher I've got a higher score than the norm, if you like. So far it seems quite promising, and this shows you that again, the IPA award winners, where they sit relative to all the ads that we've ever tested on our database. So they're at the top end of the ads that we have tested. How does it stack up against some of the other measures we've been talking about? What we've got here is emotion into action relative to key message, whether the message was on message as determined by the intended message in the IPA submissions themselves. We've got persuasion, which you've seen before, brand linkage you've seen before, but also we've created recreated an established industry cut-through measure equivalent. So this is based on brand linkage. It's also based on a number of emotional words that give you a sort of passive and active dimension, and also on sort of essentially entertainment. It's a well-established measure, and this is a sort of an attempt to recreate that. So what we've got here, and what you can see, is the number of business effects that are achieved by the best 9 ads and the worst 9 ads on each of these measures. And you can see that key message seems pretty good at predicting effectiveness. The best 9 ads on it do very well. The best 9 ads on emotion into action also do very well. And similar levels of predictive ability, if you like. But persuasion, brand linkage, and the cut-through measure equivalent actually are better at predicting a lack of success, if you like. So the bottom 9 ads, the worst scoring ads on each of these measures, actually do better in the marketplace than the best 9 ads, which is quite challenging and sort of confirms our hypothesis early on that some of these industry standards are actually stifling highly effective advertising, and that it's possible to achieve highly effective advertising and do poorly on these measures. Another finding from our work was that emotion into action is more predictive of profit gain, specifically than the established cut-through measure. So what we have here, we know that of the 18 ads we tested, 5 of them reported very large business effects on profit gain. The best 9 ads on emotion into action, of those 9, 4 of those 9 were the ones that had high levels of profit gain. If you look at the best 9 ads on the cut-through measure, only 1 achieved profit gain. So emotion into action seems a better predictor of profit gain than an industry standard. Now, what I've been showing you so far is pure sort of effectiveness data, but what we haven't done is factored into any of that until now the spend that was behind those ads. When you look at spend, and we do this in terms of sort of excess share of voice, so how much the brand is sort of spending, if you like, relative to its size in the marketplace, and you look at that, compare that with share of market gain, you can see that the emotion into action score is actually an extremely efficient measure. That a key message it seems to drop and is not as efficient a measure. That the other measures are also not particularly efficient by comparison with the emotion into action measure. So it sort of suggests that key message, that if you're trying to drive a message home, you'll need an awful lot of spend behind it to ensure that that message registers and has its desired effect. Whereas emotion, an emotional advert, emotional strategy, might be more efficient, that you might have to do less in terms of your spend to ensure that you sort of get the desired effect that you're intending. It's interesting that the cut-through measure doesn't perform as well as emotion into action, because the original purpose of such a cut-through measure was to help with media planning, and the efficiency of it here is not as strong as our emotion into action measure, suggesting that emotion into action would be a better guide to media planning than the cut-through measure equivalent. One of the things that our clients often say to us is, well, we believe that emotion's important, of course it is, but really it's only there to, its only purpose is to serve as a velvet glove for the sort of iron fist of a message. So it's the envelope that wraps up the message. So I wanted to investigate this, and I looked at our 18 ads, and what I'm doing here is comparing them for you on their message recall, if you like, the ability of people to identify the message, and the emotion into action score. And there are two ads here which seem to perform, you can see they stand out straight away, particularly well on emotion into action, but poorly on key message takeout. And those two ads are Tropicana Breakfast in New York and Cadbury's Chocolate Digestives. Both of these awards, these ads, and we know this because there's published data, achieved very high levels of effectiveness in the marketplace. Tropicana won an IPA Silver Award. It grew the brand in market. It reduced price elasticity. It achieved a very good ROI. Yet it didn't achieve here in our tests, as you can see, very high levels of message takeout. Yet it did perform very well on emotion into action. And it's just interesting to note that the cut-through, it didn't achieve a very good cut-through score when it was tested originally prior to rollout. The IPA Bronze Award winner is the Chocolate Digestive ad. So the Chocolate Digestive ad also achieved very high levels of effectiveness in the marketplace. Increased sales, it generated additional an additional £2.59 million in sales for for the £1 million that was spent on it. It also, I can tell you anecdotally, improved measures on loyalty and other important effectiveness measures. And that only achieved 7% of the sample accurately replaying the message, but with a very high emotion into action score. So it seems that message is important. It does help to drive effectiveness, but emotion that seems to do it more efficiently, and also emotion can work in and of itself. It doesn't need to be simply a device for delivering a message. So what I'm showing you here is that original experiment, if you remember back, it was quite a while ago now when I was showing you this originally, and I've just applied the emotion into action scores onto these scores retrospectively. And you can see here that it separates very nicely the IPA award-winning ads from those that weren't submitted and didn't win any awards. I just want to spend a moment talking to you about emotional journeys, because advertising can affect people during the course of the ad, of course, as well as the overall footprint that it leaves with you. And when we analysed the 18 ads, there seemed to be 3 different patterns that were coming through in terms of emotional journeys. And we can do this by showing the ad again and asking people to stop the ad when they flick the mouse and tell us what they're feeling at any given time. So you can see here over the course of the ad, this is one example of the emotional journeys that we see. And you can see how happiness and surprise are sort of building at the end, resolving those negative emotions that are set up in the middle of the ad. Another example is how happiness and surprise build towards the at the end of the ad. And then here you've got an example of negative emotions building as the ad ends. And each of these three types of emotional journey seems to have a bearing on effectiveness. If the resolution of a negative emotion is associated with very high levels of business effects in the marketplace, so that tension, resolution, that happiness and surprise building as the ad finishes is also a good thing. But if you have negative emotions building as the ad finishes, that is not a very good thing at all. And although the effects seem to be, quite positive here, you have to remember that these were all reasonably effective ads, and this is actually an indication of failure. The other thing that we do is ask types of happiness. Once we've asked people from the original face, which of these emotions do you feel, those people who select happiness are asked which type of happiness do you feel. This is also based on Ekman's work, and he points to 12 different sorts of happiness. And it seems, analysing our data, that these sorts of happiness each have a different bearing on business effects. So certain sorts of happiness seem very good at delivering business effects, the ones on the right-hand side of your chart, particularly humour, being awe-inspired, ecstatic, uplifted. But what we've also shown on this chart is the ability of these ads to deliver on intermediate effects. These are softer brand-building objectives, such as image, trust, quality, even awareness building. So it's interesting to note that certain types of happiness are more helpful than others when building when achieving different sorts of objective. I've shown you that here again, the types of happiness across the top, and just sort of color-coded and given you a sense of how predictive each of these types of happiness are for business effects on the one hand, and intermediate effects on the other, the softer brand building effects. And I'm just showing you beneath how those intermediate effects break down, which of them which of these effects each type of happiness is particularly good at predicting effectiveness for. These are the sorts of intermediate effects you'd see in tracking studies, you'd measure in tracking studies. So you can see that awe-inspired, ecstatic, uplifted, these are particularly good at delivering both business and intermediate effects. What's interesting is that amusement, for instance, seems very good at delivering on business effects, but not very good at delivering on intermediate effects. And that is interesting because it suggests that perhaps tracking research isn't particularly good at picking up on all sorts of business effect. That whilst you can be measuring trust and differentiation and so on, you might actually, through these evaluative measures, be missing a trick. That perhaps if we ask people more about how they felt towards the brand, they would be better off than asking them to evaluate the brand on a number of sort of traditional sort of attributes. Anyway, interesting map, if you like, of how types of happiness can be used for different sorts of objective. And I'll just point out the fame row here because it's quite interesting that only certain sorts of happiness can deliver on fame, and that's getting the ad talked about, and I'll come on to talk about that in just a moment. In fact, right now. What we've found with fame ads, so these are ads that build authority for a brand, that get it talked about essentially, is that fame ads evoke very high levels of emotional response, high levels of happiness, and particularly the type of happiness that we've just seen, ecstasy, blissful, awe-inspired. They also score particularly well on difference and memorability. They score poorly, however, on rational measures, like makes me want to buy the product, relevance, and persuasion. And what we'll see in a moment is they have a particular kind of emotional journey through the ad. And just in our experience, they seem to reward the viewer with incredible amounts of visual detail and tend to have a creative idea that can be developed over time and through different channels. This shows you the relationship between emotional intensity on one axis and the number of YouTube hits that a number of ads we've tested have achieved. And you can see here the sort of exponential relationship between the two variables. And the Cadbury Gorilla and the Heineken walk-in fridge examples, which hopefully some of you will have seen, if not, do try and see them on YouTube. They're well worth the effort. These two I'd just like to single out because they've both achieved very high levels of sort of success in terms of viral viral word of mouth, if you like. Gorilla and the Heineken fridge both achieve very similar profiles on emotional response and emotional intensity. Two very different ads, but achieve similar levels of emotional response. They also, I should say, Heineken does this on a 30-second, whereas Gorilla is a 90-second ad. You can see how they stack up relative to our norm there. Both of them have very similar journeys. If you look at the Cadbury Dairy Milk ad, you can see how there's an initial kick in surprise and happiness around the time that you first see his nostrils flaring, that there's a build in sort of negative emotions that's resolved by an incredible leap in surprise and happiness, and that surprise subsides and gives way to more happiness as the ad progresses. The same pattern is true actually of the Heineken walk-in fridge as well. Here you see the first flare of happiness and surprise. For those of you who've seen the ad, it's where the girls go into the closet. Perhaps I wouldn't spoil it for you, but it's a wonderful moment. And then negative emotions build, and then the second lump of surprise and happiness build in exactly the same way that they did in the Gorilla. So there's a complex emotional journey going on for both of these two ads that delivered fame for their respective brands. And both these two ads, when you compare the types of happiness that they achieve, are pretty similar in that they seem to deliver well on the types of happiness that we saw a moment ago deliver well on fame. So they deliver better than the IPA ads we've been talking about in the past sort of hour or so on specifically excited, awe-inspired, and ecstatic and blissful. And they perform worse than the IPA ads we tested on a sense of contentment and pleased for others, which were seen on the chart earlier actually to be poor predictors of fame. They also perform well on being uplifted and amused. I think my personal view on humour is that it can and is very effective in the use in delivering fame, but only really when combined with other types of happiness. That humour and a joke in and of itself probably won't deliver you the fame that you're looking for. So just some closing thoughts really on what we've seen today. That we've seen that efficiency and effectiveness really can be achieved through putting emotion at the heart of your campaigns and, of course, in measuring them in pre-testing. That emotion isn't really a means to an end, just a means to an end, not just a vehicle for delivering a message, but actually an end in itself, that you can have a communication strategy that's based on emotion. That traditional evaluative and sort of message measures tend to discriminate against emotional ads that are highly effective. That message campaigns can deliver business effects, but at lower levels of efficiency than emotional campaigns. We've also seen that our emotion into action measure is predictive of very large business effects in the market, such as share gain, profit gain, reductions in price sensitivity, and often in a way that that other evaluative measures aren't. They discriminate against ads that are likely to perform well on these measures in market. And we've also seen how different types of journey and different types of happiness can deliver effectiveness more than others. So that's really what I wanted to share with you today. I think we've got just a few minutes for questions, which I think I'm hoping there have been some. Let me just have a look through and see what we've got here. So, question. How does emotion into action compare with brain measurement approaches in its prediction of ad effectiveness and impact? Well, that's a good question. I am yet to see any evidence, any hard evidence tied into business effectiveness for brain measurement and sort of MRI scanning. As I said earlier, I think brain measurement is extremely helpful and has been extremely useful in the in terms of helping us to understand how the brain works and the importance of emotion. I think it's less helpful at telling us how people are feeling and being a useful diagnostic in terms of, helping people to change creative or develop creative further. So it's difficult to. I'm afraid I haven't seen any data, and I would love to see some data on a sort of on this sort of basis. So I hope that answered your question. Let's have a look. Is there any more questions? Have you got a view on the use of branding versus surprise on the emotional journey? Does introducing the brand at the beginning of a TVC have a negative impact on the effectiveness or efficiency of it? It's not an analysis I've done as part of this work, but my feeling is that branding is something that doesn't need to be explicit, and certainly when it comes to fame ads, are by their very nature actually. Heineken and the Gorilla ads that I was telling you about a moment ago are ads which deliberately don't explicitly have very strong branding. They do it sort of implicitly through the clever use of colour. And the reason that they're able to speak with authority for the category is because they do step back. They're not pushing a product message. They are generating an emotion that will be associated with the brand. And they are almost ads that could have been made for any brand within those categories. And what they're doing is celebrating the emotion that goes with that category. And they're doing so in a way that that gives them authority precisely by not being explicit in their branding. So I think the use of the branding, and particularly with the development of digital advertising and online advertising, branding doesn't necessarily need to be as explicit as we think it has to be if you've got a highly emotional ad. And the other thing to think about, of course, as well, is that on sites such as YouTube, you search for an ad by its brand name. And that in fact there is now branding outside the advert, that the ad can have strong branding by virtue of its link on YouTube. So anyway, I think that's hopefully that's sort of answered your question. But it's an interesting one that you raised. It's something that I'd like to I'll look into. So thank you, Matt. I think that's probably all the questions. So I just want to say thanks very much for your attention. Thanks for tuning in. I hope it was an interesting session, and look forward to hearing more from you. And I've just written a paper on the results of this experiment, which we can share with you. If you'd like to get a copy of the paper, then please do get in touch with any of the people you can see on this screen, and we'll be able to send that on to you. So thanks very much, and good evening from me, and good morning, good day to the rest of you. Bye-bye.